I'm Laura Faye from White Pots. I would like to welcome our special guest today, Rich from Bull City Legal Services. Rich, I am so excited to have you here today, and I'm really eager to learn all about you. So welcome.
Thanks, I'm thrilled to be here.
Absolutely, absolutely. Did you want to start by just sharing with us a little bit about yourself and your journey, how you got here?
Sure, yeah. So it's called Bull City Legal Services because the firm is located in Durham, North Carolina, which is, I don't know if you've ever seen Bull Durham, but the nickname of Durham is Bull City because of the baseball team that we have here.
Oh,
So Bull City Legal Services, I moved here in 2015, so just over 9 years ago, to attend school. I went to law school and got a master's of public policy while living in Durham. I went to law school at the University of North Carolina, and got the policy degree from Duke University. And I just really loved the area, so I ended up staying. I grew up in Arizona. I spent most of my childhood in the Mountain West. Went to college in Idaho, and so now I've been here this 9 years. So
9 years. And where do you prefer?
oh, I love it in Durham. I visit Arizona every year or two, mostly just to go hiking and see family. And if you go there anytime between like April and October, you're not going to want to live there. So
But you love it there.
in Arizona.
Well, in Durham, you said,
Oh
right?
yeah, yeah. Oh, I love Durham. It really is my home. Durham's got a great tight-knit community. It's not a huge city. I think
Right.
there's about 250,000 or 300,000 people in Durham, so it's not uncommon. You know, you go downtown, you run into somebody. I was at a work meeting yesterday, and I ran into a couple of really good friends at a coffee shop. So Durham's great. I really love it here a lot.
That's really good. You have to love where you live. It's so, so important. You spend
Yeah.
every minute of every day there, so you better love it, right?
Yeah, and really, I mean, my experience is, I moved around a lot between the age of 20 and 30. So I took a lot of jobs, doing like sales and things all over the country. And my experience is really like you get out of any place what you put into it, really. So I've been here for a while. I've been here for 9 years, and I feel like I've really been able to develop a community, and yeah, I really love it.
That's excellent. That's excellent. I'm really interested to learn about your business. So would you mind sharing a little bit with our listeners about your business, a brief overview?
Yeah, sure. So I guess like maybe the best thing to do would be to start with some background about the legal field generally.
Sure.
So there generally are two types of law firms. There's for-profit law firms and nonprofit law firms. And my law firm is a nonprofit. So most nonprofit law firms survive by getting grants. So they receive grants from the state or the federal government or even like philanthropic groups that are interested in particular issues. And those funds go to particular legal services. So Legal Aid of North Carolina, for example, is the largest law firm in North Carolina. And their budget is very line item. So they can do certain types of cases and they can only serve people who make up to a certain income threshold. So for
Right.
example, if you're single and you make 13.50 an hour, you make too much money for legal aid to help you with an eviction, which is like a pretty low income threshold, right? So
Yeah, absolutely.
traditional firms, what they typically do, they charge, depending on the practice area. In Durham, the going rate on the low end is like 250, $300 per hour. It's not uncommon to see $400 or $500 per hour for some types of cases, and they'll collect the full fee up front. So, let's again say you're making 13.50 an hour. That's about $27,000 a year. For a law firm to take your case in that situation, they want the full fee up front, which can easily be $12,000, $15,000, which
Yeah.
is most of what you make in a year, right? So for most people, hiring an attorney is unaffordable, right? So I haven't really seen firm numbers on this, but to me, it seemed from the research I've done, it seems like about 40% of people make too much money for free legal services and not enough money to hire a regular law firm. So what my firm does is the goal is to fill that gap. So we have fees that are on a sliding scale. So our hourly rate depends upon your household income and how many dependents you have. So originally the goal was, when I started the firm, as the name kind of indicates, Bull City Legal Services, the idea was to just serve the Durham community and to do pretty much anything. But very quickly, I started the firm. On paper, I started it a little over 2 years ago, but it takes a long time to get IRS approval to be a nonprofit. And then once I got that approval, it took me a lot of time to get approval from the state bar to make sure, had all my ducks in a row. So we started taking clients a little over 1 year ago. And very quickly, we started getting requests from all over the state for services, because there's just a massive need. There's a lot of people out there who, they need to get custody of their kid or child support. Their landlord won't fix a hole in their roof, whatever. And we're one of the few firms in the state that have sliding scale fees. So we're starting to offer, well, right now we serve the whole Triangle community. For those who aren't familiar with North Carolina, the Triangle is Raleigh, Durham, and Chapel Hill and the surrounding area. So we serve the full Triangle community, and we're working on expanding services into Charlotte as well. So
it's really, really interesting. And I think that's so admirable, because you're giving people who just don't have the finances to get an attorney, you're giving them an opportunity to do that based on their income. If I'm understanding you correctly, your fees are based off of that.
yeah, they receive a discount. So we base everything on the market rate.
Right.
And they receive a certain percentage discount off the market rate, depending on their income and household size. So it's all based on the federal poverty guidelines. Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, we have a lot of systems in place legally for things that don't require you to handle a lawyer, right? Like getting married is a legal process, and you don't have to handle a lawyer. We just have administrative processes in place, because we know statistically, for a city the size of Durham, we're gonna have this number of marriages per year. To me, it's a massive failure that we don't do the same thing for a lot of other issues. We know there are going to be a certain number of divorces every year in a city our size, child support, custody, visitation claims, claims against landlords for habitability issues, wrongful evictions. We know just statistically that there are going to be a certain number of issues every year, but we don't have administrative processes in place to help with that. And so unfortunately, in my opinion, you really shouldn't have to hire a lawyer if your landlord refuses to like get rid of the rats or something, right? So, but so unfortunately, we are filling a need. There is a huge need, and the firm's been growing very quickly because of it. So
That's excellent. That's excellent. You're doing a good thing, and I tend to agree with you on everything that you're saying. I'm curious, what made you get into this?
yeah, that's a long story. So I mean, I'll give you the short version. So I'm not from North Carolina. I only came here for school originally. So when I was applying to law schools, I had, everyone who is going to law school, unless you just like absolutely crushed the LSAT and you're going to Harvard or Stanford or Duke, you generally have like reach schools, and then you have schools that you think I'm probably going to get into, and then you have backup schools, right? So I had like 10 schools I was going to apply to, and then I decided anywhere that invites me to apply and waives the fee, I'll apply, right? Because it doesn't really, it's just, I got to click a few buttons on the website to apply. So, the University of North Carolina invited me to apply. And when I was originally going to law school, my plan was to work in healthcare reform. For a variety of different reasons, different experiences I had growing up, I really still care a lot about healthcare reform. And so my plan anyway was to probably go to DC after I graduated from law school and get a job working in the Senate or something, and hopefully another big bill would come through doing healthcare reform, and I would get to work on it. That was kind of the dream. So while I was in school, some things happened politically that made it look like healthcare reform probably wasn't going to happen anytime soon, to put it lightly. And so I kind of had to pivot. So after I graduated from law school, I started doing I was kind of trying to reorient and figure out what I was gonna do. I started doing some independent freelancing for different like tech companies. And I was just kind of looking around, seeing maybe where my niche was. And during law school, I had clerked at a court that did Medicaid appeals. So in North Carolina, the process is that if you have a claim on that you want Medicaid to pay for because you're a Medicaid recipient, and Medicaid refuses, you have to go to a court in Raleigh. It's called the Office of Administrative Hearings, which is where I clerked. And you appear before a judge, you show your medical records, your doctor comes and testifies, and you basically just say, Medicaid, you gotta pay for this, right?
Right,
But for most people, if you're on Medicaid, you don't have the resources to hire an attorney, right? Because by
right,
definition, to be on Medicaid, you're almost always low income.
right,
So these people were coming into court representing themselves, and often they didn't have the resources. Either they're like out working, trying to find work and then working as much as they can. They don't have time to do the research and figure it out. They're almost always unsuccessful. So the judge would, often if they came and their doctor wasn't there and they didn't have medical records, the judge would do as much as she could. She would say, come back in a month with your medical records. And if they didn't, she had to dismiss it. But so what I thought was maybe I would start a law firm to represent people in those situations for free. So I did some research to try to see if I could find grants, and it looked like I could. So if I had some success, it looked like there were a couple organizations that would be willing to fund my nonprofit law firm doing Medicaid appeals. So I started the process of doing that. And then a couple weeks later, Legal Aid in North Carolina, which is a large nonprofit law firm in North Carolina, announced that they had gotten a grant to do Medicaid appeals. And I had been emailing them and I said, I know that like 5 or 6 years ago, you were doing Medicaid appeals and that you stopped because you ran out of grant funding. Can I talk to somebody who's done this, and maybe you can help orient me and get me started going down this process? And I just never heard back from anybody.
right,
Turns out they were in the final process of finalizing that grant. So when I heard about it, I emailed them. I was like, hey, I've been emailing you for months. I'm clearly interested in this. I would love to be part of this team. They did interview me, but they ended up hiring internally, which, they have an internal hiring preference, but they offered me another position and said, something else opens up, with the internal hiring preference, you'll most likely get the position, you'll be able to work on the Medicaid team. But it wasn't like the type of law that I wanted to do. And
right,
for a variety of other reasons, it wasn't a good fit for me. But that whole process really showed me, I learned a lot about the gaps in access and affordability. I learned a lot about the grant cycles and how, a nonprofit law firm might be doing something for a couple of years, but then if the grant dries up, they're not going to be doing it anymore. And so I started thinking about, how can I supplement that? What are like some of the solutions to the problems caused by this grant model? And don't get me wrong, like the grant model is amazing. Like there are a lot of people out there who can't pay anything and they really do need free legal services. But it doesn't cover enough people, right? So I think Legal Aid in North Carolina, if I'm remembering this right, maybe I'm not. I think that they get less than 20% of the funding that they need to cover their mission. So they do awesome work and they do a lot with that 20%, but it's, you can only do so much with so little. So
Okay.
I did research online and I found a law firm in Seattle where this, a great attorney out there was doing immigration law on a sliding scale. I looked around and I found some more. There weren't very many. Frankly, there aren't very many law firms doing sliding scale
right,
services, and the ones that typically are only doing one or two things. So I had the idea, what if I start this firm and it's just in Durham and we try to do everything. So that's kind of how I got to where I am today. And then, as I said before, we very quickly started getting requests from, all over the state for services.
That's really, really interesting, really interesting. Now, being that you offer these services and they obviously are very important and there's a need for them, how are you letting people know about that? Like, in other words, what has been your best marketing strategy?
Yeah, that's a good question. So one thing is we're very lucky that we have the benefit of being a nonprofit. Google for Nonprofits is a great tool. I don't know if you're aware of it, but Google essentially allows nonprofits gives nonprofits a grant every month, essentially just for Google searches. So we get some clients from the internet. They just search, attorney Durham, North Carolina, and we come right up. Um, the other way is that we often get referrals from the courts because we're a nonprofit, the courts can refer us to people. And I've also spent a lot of time over the last year developing relationships with other nonprofits like Legal Aid. There's a great nonprofit in Raleigh called Justice Matters. There's lots of nonprofits in the Triangle that typically will refer people to the organization that fits best. And so if somebody, like for example, if somebody's working with legal aid on a restraining order, legal aid can help you get a domestic violence protection order or a restraining order. But if you also want to get divorced after that, they can't help you. They often can't, almost always can't help you get child support, custody, visitation, get a divorce, get documents to decide who's going to get the house, stuff like that. So then they would come and we would work with them in that sort of situation. So most referrals.
Yeah, absolutely. It sounds it. Now, every business has challenges. We know this. No one's left out of that, unfortunately. So what would you say some of your challenges have been, and how did you overcome those challenges?
Well, I mean, I wouldn't say I've overcome them. So, I mean, there definitely certainly are challenges. So, I mean, as I kind of indicated earlier, a traditional law firm that's fee for service like mine, what they almost always do is they require the whole fee or like 80% of the fee up front at the beginning. They say, okay, we charge $500 an hour. Your cases, we expect it to take 30 hours. Was that $15,000? If I shouldn't do math, just live like this. But so they require you to make that full $15,000 up front
Right.
before they even agree to take your case, right? But for me, because the goal is access to legal services, we really try to break it up into small payments to make it more affordable to clients. So what we do is we take a 10-hour payment at most upfront. So if somebody's getting a 50% discount off the market rate, which like 93% of our clients do, then initially, if the case is going to take more than 10 hours, we'll take the 10-hour payment, $1,500 in that situation, and then we'll collect payments incrementally throughout the case, right? So as you might imagine, that creates a huge administrative burden, right? So it's collecting payments from clients, scheduling it, trying to figure out who's going to need hours in the next couple of weeks, how many hours they have a court date when, how many hours do you need to prepare for that in the couple weeks before, and then scheduling those payments. And I mean, frankly, my clients are financially distressed. So it's difficult for them when an attorney calls and says, hey, we need a payment and we need it in the next couple of weeks, so I really try to stay on top of it so that way I can give clients as much notice as possible. But maybe something happens and we start burning through some of the hours quicker than we expected, and we need a payment sooner than we thought. It stresses them out, and it's hard. So it's really the administrative collecting payments and scheduling payments, working with clients on them. That's by
That-
far the
Yeah, no, that makes perfect sense, and it's very understandable. Well, you've certainly differentiated yourself from everything that you've shared. It's very clear that you differentiated yourself, that you provide value. It sounds to me like you don't skimp on services. You just try to work to make it affordable for people who would not have that opportunity, but it sounds like they're getting top-notch representation, which is excellent. And I want to know this because you've come so far already over the couple of years. If I had the crystal ball that everybody wishes that they could look into, what what do you see in the future for your business? Where would you like to be years from now? What are you striving for?
Well, I mean, the ultimate goal is for sliding scale services to be available in every county in North Carolina. So right now, there are 3 in the state. So there's mine serving the Triangle, and we're starting to serve Charlotte. There's Triad Legal, I think it's called Triad Legal Services or Triad Legal Group, and they're in the Greensboro area. And then there's Inner Banks, which is kind of out toward the coast. So most of the state is not covered. So ideally, what I would like to do is expand into the areas where there's currently not sliding scale services and begin to offer, at the very least, family law, tenancy, and employment services to all of those counties.
That is excellent. Rich, it has been such a pleasure learning about your business, how you got there, what your plans are, and how you help people. It's truly been a pleasure, and I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart for sharing that with us today and being a part of White Pods.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's been great. I appreciate the work that you're doing to get people's story out there.
Absolutely, absolutely. Thank you again, and much success on the way for you.
Thank you.
You're welcome.